Hey everyone, welcome to this week's theme video on John Milton's Paradise Lost. I consider this week's video both to address key themes in the work and also to focus your attention on key passages, because this is one of our longer readings, and while there's so much we could talk about, I've tried to focus our attention to specific areas where I think our attention will be most rewarded. So to do that, I want to start in book 2. We had 2 books, book 2 and book 9, and the opening 485 lines here. Some things I want you to notice here is that we have this gathering of devils. Sometimes it's referred to as the Parliament of Devils in this book. All of whom are gathered into this debate-like setting in which they've been cast into hell. They have lost the battle in heaven. God has thrown them into hell. And now they've come together to see what they can do about it. What should they do going forward? And they conduct themselves like people would on the floor of the parliament, giving speeches, uninterrupted speeches, and then sitting back down and waiting for the next person to get up and, offer another perspective or offer a rebuttal, etc. In this section, each devil adopts a distinct perspective and argument as they consider how best to fight back against God in heaven. So question 1, I want you to simply figure out, what does each devil argue? Each devil who speaks says something slightly different. I think we should just take it easy and hang out in hell. We've suffered enough. I think we definitely need to fight back, no matter the case. All of them propose different solutions to this newfound problem they find themselves in, being stuck in hell. So first, I want you to just think about what each devil argues. Read each speech each devil gives. Here's the order of their speaking right here, from Satan to Moloch to Belial to Mammon to Beelzebub, back to Satan. Okay, another thing I want to draw our attention to is at many points in this series of lines, Satan is referred to as a kind of leader or a kind of ruler. And here's where that political background of Milton's comes into play. His leadership is described in the opening lines as being the result of free choice, achieved of merit, and yielded with full consent. So his leadership is described as if he were kind of properly elected, as opposed to God, who is this tyrant figure who was never elected, just rules over anyone without their consent, and kind of violates the consent of all of his subjects. Satan is portraying himself as someone who does the opposite. He was chosen to lead. He has done so with the full consent of those over whom he is ruling. So I want to ask you why you think Satan, or Milton, portrays Satan in this way in particular. Later on, he's described as having, I made a typo, monarchical pride, as, having the pride of a monarch. So Satan almost seems to vacillate between a ruler chosen with the full consent of his people and a monarch-like ruler as well. So why do you think Milton is featuring Satan and these devils in a parliamentary setting? Why do you think Milton casts God as the tyrant to be defeated? God is really like Charles I, essentially. Do you think Milton sees himself in Satan? Is Satan his hero in this piece? Why do you think Milton links his own political revolution to Satan's? Or do you think Satan somehow corrupts Milton's own, purer political beliefs? Puzzle through this question with me. Why do you think Satan, who we already know is the epic hero, is also the kind of political hero, the parliamentarian hero of Milton's own background and experience? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question. Another moment in book 2 that I want to draw our attention to is towards the end of this book, when 2 allegorical figures appear, sin and death. And with sin especially, I want you to listen closely to how sin is described. Sin seemed woman to the waist and fair, but ended foul in many a scaly fold, voluminous and vast, a serpent armed with mortal sting. About her middle round a cry of hellhounds never ceasing barked, with wide Cerberian mouths full loud, and rung a hideous peal. Yet, when they list, would creep, if aught disturbed their noise, into her womb, and kennel there, yet there still barked and howled within unseen. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a character you've read about recently? If any of you realized, oh, ding ding, this sounds just like Error in Spenser's Faerie Queene, you'd be absolutely right. Milton loved the Faerie Queene, he loved Spenser, and they shared a lot of political beliefs because Spenser was a very staunch Protestant, kind of like Milton. So why do you think Sin is portrayed in this way? She has a lot in common with Error. We've got the serpent-woman mixture. We've also got the offspring who kind of cycle in and out of her body. This time they are hellhounds that go in and out of her womb as they wish. This is a really bizarre, creepy image. Why do you think Milton is portraying Sin in this way? Is there poetic significance to some of these aspects of Sin here that we could unwrap or unravel? Death also makes an appearance here. Death is primarily characterized by how indistinguishable death is. Death is the other shape, if shape it might be called, that shape had none. Death doesn't really have a shape. So that's another characterization I'd love to hear your thoughts on here too. Okay, so in book 9, we have the book that addresses the fall. And the two characters I'm most passionate about in this book is Eve and Satan, and some of the commonalities that we have. So before Eve gets to the tree and has that, very dramatic moment of eating the fruit, there's a previous moment that's dramatized at length in the book when Eve and Adam have a discussion in the garden. This is, at the lines mentioned here. So again, let's start with the reading comprehension question. What are Eve and Adam discussing? What does Eve want? What does Adam want? Essentially, they're discussing how best to go about their gardening work. Eve has ideas. She has proposals. She has innovations. Adam doesn't like that. Adam just wants to do things like they've always done them. Eve asks a lot of questions. Adam follows the rules. So I'm already kind of characterizing some of the differences here. And I'm just going to come out and say it. I think Eve seems to be the more interesting character, the person who thinks creatively and proposes new ideas, and Adam feels kind of boring. He just wants to do things that he's told to do and not really deviate too much from that. So I'm going to read Eve's speech here that I think is the most powerful at line 322. If this be our condition, thus to dwell, in narrow circuits straitened by a foe, subtle or violent, we not endued single with like defense were ever met, how are we happy, still in fear of harm? But harm precedes not sin, only our foe tempting affronts us with his foul esteem of our integrity. His foul esteem sticks no dishonor on our front, but turns foul on himself. Then wherefore shunned or feared by us, who rather double honor gain from his surmise proved false? Find peace within, favor from heaven, our witness from the event. And what is faith, love, virtue unassayed, alone, without exterior help sustained? Let us not then suspect our happy state, left so imperfect by the Maker wise, as not secure to single or combined. Frail is our happiness, if this be so, and Eden were no Eden, thus exposed. Oh, I love that so much. Let me do a very quick summary of what Eve's saying here. Eve wants to go out and do more work in the garden. Adam is scared to do that because he heard from the angels that there's someone out there trying to tempt them. Eve asks this really pressing question. What is our life if we're always living in fear and not allowing ourselves to do things in this garden because there's some bad dude out there? That does not sound like Eden. That does not sound like paradise. What are our virtues if they're never tried or assayed? How can we know that we have virtue if we never get to try it out against some bad dude who tries to make us not virtuous? So there's a lot of creativity and free thinking in Eve's response here. I think this has a lot in common with Satan, when Satan appears later on in the book. Satan, when he's trying to convince Eve to eat of the fruit of this tree, also uses a lot of questions, like Eve does, to kind of push Eve into considering eating the apple. I'll read part of his speech here too. Okay, here we go. O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, Now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, deemed however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should you? By the fruit? It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener? Look on me, who have touched and tasted, yet both live, and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me, by venturing higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man, which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass, and not praise rather your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil of good? How just! Of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? God therefore cannot hurt ye, and be just, not God, not feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why then was this forbid? Okay, I'll pause the speech there. But notice that Milton's using this very similar rhetorical tactic that Eve used with Adam earlier, asking really pressing questions. And even though we know this story to be about how, this is how sin enters the world. So both Satan and Eve are in some ways flawed actors. It's hard not to see them as being quite admirable in their actions here. Satan is encouraging Eve to reach for knowledge and understanding, to reach for the tools that would allow her to better understand the universe. How could that be a bad thing? Now I'm sounding like Satan here, asking these rhetorical questions. The way Eve and Satan talk are just so profoundly engaging and stimulating that it's hard to resist their logic. So I want to ask you, although many versions of this story kind of fault Eve and say, oh, bad Eve, Eve's dumb, Eve didn't think hard, do you think that Milton admires and respects Satan and Eve? And at the very least, we can say Eve is no dummy. Eve seems a lot smarter than Adam in this story, and she asks hard questions and is pushing the limits of knowledge. I think that's true regardless of what we conclude about her culpability. And then finally, when she finally does eat the fruit, we have this incredibly short line. Forth reaching to the fruit, she plucked, she eat. Why would Milton tell this moment so briefly, since we know he loves to stretch out a sentence and he loves to stretch out a narrative moment? Why do you think this is so short? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that too. All right, that's the themes video for this week. I mean, there's a lot we're covering in this text, but I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on what I think is such an intellectually provocative and engaging piece of writing.